look at code of conduct and how you evaluate boards. I would like everybody to just, that's in the session today, to just type in and let me know that you can see the screen or that you can hear me okay. So if you can just in the right-hand section, just type in, yes, I can hear you, no, I cannot hear you, yes, I can see the screen. Then I'll know that we're all seeing the same thing at the same time, and then I can get started. So I'll take a moment to get some feedback. Okay, good. So today we are looking at Code of Conduct, Ethics, and Evaluation of Boards. As Petra said, it's a continuation of the 6-part series that we did on the strategic leadership training and governance. If you go to the forum, which the resources is listed on this current slide, you'll be able to see all the previous sessions that's been done to help bring you up to speed. So if you are a board member or executive director that wants to direct your new board members to resources to help them enhance their skills, this would be a good place to start. So today, basically, we're looking at the ethics behind governance, code of conduct, how it relates to roles and responsibility as a board member, the guiding principles behind code of conduct, and how do you measure performance on your board. So first I want to look at the function. The bottom line is this. As a board member, you have a responsibility and you're accountable for the ethics of the and the governance of how the board function. The chair of the board has the responsibility, the larger responsibility, to ensure that the members are following the regulations or the bylaws. These are stuff that should be clearly stated in your bylaws, as well as, so the function, the code, should be part of the commitment letter that every new board member signs before they are brought on as a new member. So this gives them a clear understanding and guidelines of what is expected of them when they are in public, when they are in board meetings, and when they're functioning as a representative of the organization. It's very important that we understand the ethics behind how you as a board member function. And it's one of those tricky things. You go to a board and then you have all this power, and the power that you have can make or break an organization if the power is not used correctly. And the example I'm looking at is, as the chair of a board, if you go on to an organizational voluntary board and you expect to be treated as a staff, then that kind of derails the process of where you as an organization is going to go. So it's very important that we understand your functions as a board member. So let's take a look at that today and see how I can help guide the process if you haven't already designed your own process, and if you have, this is to help you kind of just enhance what you already have. So the function basically is organization function well because of its standards and policies, and the leadership is responsible for monitoring that. So quarterly or annually, the leadership, via the chair of the board, the president of the organization, needs to do some monitoring to ensure that you're staying on the mission, the vision, and you're following the guidelines. The ethical standards of a board is the responsibility not only of the chair of the board, but it's the responsibility of every member on the board. So right now I'd like to kind of do a poll and find out, does your organization have an ethical guideline policy for its member? So if you guys could just take a moment and just do yes or no, so I can just see how many of you have actually gone through this particular exercise already of designing an ethical guidelines policy. So while I'm waiting for the poll, I will also just spend a little bit of time and say that I've rearranged the presentation in the sense that I'm going to do ethics first, and then I'm going to do code of conduct, and then we're going to finish with evaluation, just in keeping of how the flow of it. So basically, the ethics is the individual piece that you as a board member, as a person, have to kind of understand. And then once you understand the ethical guidelines behind how you are going to navigate on the board, then it's easier for you to follow code of conduct, which then leads into when evaluation times come by and you're being evaluated around performance, there isn't a shift towards negativity per se, because there's an understanding that I am being evaluated against certain factors. So currently there are 60% people here that have gone through this and 40% have not. So I'm hoping that the 60% who has will type in questions or give feedback as we're doing this to why it was necessary to do that and how well does this function within your current board. So you've gone through it, but do the boards actually use it? Do your new members review it, and do they sign off on it? So these are some questions that you as a board member or a chair needs to be visual about. So members are liable and responsible for their conduct and decisions in the role of a board. So whatever decisions that you make while you're wearing the hat of a board member, you're liable for those decisions. You are responsible for the conduct that you facilitate or the conduct you exhibit while you are wearing those hats. And it's a tricky thing, because if you're in the community and you're speaking on behalf of an issue specific to that board, you're representing that organization. If you're in the community as yourself, you're still expected to carry yourself in a way that brings respect not just to you, but also to the organizations that you are representing. So with ethical boundaries, you need ethical guidelines. So I think this is one of the areas that a lot of boards may not spend as much time in the orientation session doing with their new members as they should. I think one of the most important part of the recruitment / orientation phase of new board members is spending the time to explain your legal responsibility, your ethical responsibility, as well as just your overall sense of how you should be conducting yourself while you represent the organization. So when you join a board, you basically say, I'm going to carry out my duty to the best of my ability. It's going to be professional. I'm going to basically help the organization grow by giving input into how I can change or enhance the standards, the practice that's currently there. I'm going to follow the ethical norms that is facilitated in the bylaws. So basically what I'm saying is I'm bound or I'm guided by the bylaws and the standards that are set out before I took membership in this particular organization. This is why it's crucial that as a new board member, you spend time reviewing the policy and procedures of the organization. Because if you jump into your responsibility without clearly understanding the parameters of your power or lack thereof, I think you could come into conflict with staff, executive director, because then you're not clear about where the limitation of your power arises or ends. So it's very important that you as a new member, even an old member who's been there for a year or two, it doesn't hurt to kind of review it, okay? So the ethical performance standards is you're going to be loyal to the organization, okay? You're going to avoid conflict of interest situation. So when I say conflict of interest situation, I mean the ones that are direct, indirect, and the ones that you may not even know that may arise. So for instance, you are married to someone who works in that organization. When issues come up that your spouse may come home and talk about, that's kind of a precarious situation. So as a board member, you might have to declare that if the staff doesn't already know that you're married to someone within that organization. When issue comes up around performance appraisal or funding and stuff like that, where you might be privy to information, you might want to then say to the chair of the board, I have a conflict here because my spouse is part of that particular organization, so that it just has that clear transparency. You don't run into situations where people can then charge you of being unethical about your day-to-day practice, right? So decisions that are motivated basically for the concern of the organization, you're always acting in the best interest of the organization. If you, again, as I said, if you have a family member or personally working in the organization, you need to declare that conflict of interest, because it is a conflict of interest. Your cousin, your spouse, any family that is working within that organization, there is a possibility of you talking about information or issues within, even though we're not supposed to. We're humans, and it does happen. So you need to declare that up front before you become a full-fledged board member. You know, they voted you in and you say, okay, I agree to follow the following practice. You need to kind of say in my letter of commitment, here are the issues that may become contentious. If we're dealing with this particular organization or this funder, I may have an issue. The other is, if you know of opportunities to make money and you are in a similar business, for instance, if I am a board member and I'm a consultant, and that board requires someone to do a strategic plan, for me to go out and do the strategic plan for that organization puts me in a conflict of interest, because I'm representing myself, the private business, and I'm gaining money through the organization that I sit on the board. So I'm potentially getting money as an end result of me being that board member. So to be clear, it's out of best interest you don't apply for those positions if you are a board member. If you're a consultant and you have a friend that works in the organization, then it's the same thing. You would want to declare that conflict of interest when you're in the interviewing stage, because it doesn't want to be perceived that through the friend you were able to get that position, right? So board members also assist, excuse us, we have a pop-up problems this morning, so I apologize to you guys. Periodically something just keeps popping up, so if it blurs the screen, I'm doing my best to ensure that as it pops up we deal with it, so bear with us please. So where was I now? I was talking about favorable or preferential treatment. It's more so what other people's perception of that treatment is that you have to worry about. So the transparency that is seen to the community and the clients, that's more of what the concerns are. So when you are engaging or you are dealing with the organization, you have to ensure that other people or third party do not perceive you as getting preferential treatment as a result of sitting on a board. So board members should not receive gifts or loans unless it's specific to the function that they serve. And what I mean by that is, if you go out and someone is giving you cash donation on behalf of the organization, in the role as a board chair, you may take it and give it to the committee, and they design, you know, they put it in the fundraising part of the organization. Or you may say to that individual, I would prefer you to call the organization directly and make that donation, because then it doesn't look like you're receiving money directly. Christmas times or holidays, people love to give gifts. When you are sitting in the role of a board of directors, those gifts that you receive are not personal gifts. It actually belongs to the organization. So those gifts should go directly to the organization. It's important that we understand that there needs to be a clear divide between the personal. So when are you being you, and when are you being a board member? Crucial for transparency, okay? Especially when we're dealing with the public, it is very important that we keep that clear transparency. So the ethical practice in dealing with public staff, clients, and board, just make sure again that it's fair and honest. I was talking to somebody a little while ago about abuse of power. And one of the things that sometimes happen is that you get into a position of a board member and you start getting comfortable and feel as though you are actually a staff. You are a volunteer staff, but you're not a paid staff. So in actuality, you're not entitled to the same benefits of a paid staff. So for instance, does the chair of the board get a cell phone from the organization? Unless it's something that you have in your policy and procedures or bylaws for board members, then it's not something that the chair of the board can demand. It's the same as business cards. Unless you, as an organization, has said in your bylaws and constitution that board members will carry board business cards, then it's not something that should be requested from any board member. because they are a volunteer member of the board. Doesn't mean that they do not get reimbursed for things that they do as outlined within the policy, but they shouldn't be making demands that speaks to their needs, their individual needs. I can ask for an agenda from the organization in regards to, as a chair of the board, and it's up to the bylaws, again, how it's written, to say these are the supplies that can be given to a board or a board chair. So make sure that it's clearly outlined in your constitution, the parameters of what the exchange of power when it comes to personal resources for board members. I think this is the area that a lot of us get in trouble with, and to avoid getting in trouble, it's important to kind of put that up front. Okay? When you're in public, you're representing the organization, as I said. So as an end result, you need to be able to speak positively about the issues and about the organization. So again, part of the ethical piece of that is carrying yourself in such a way that it does not put your organization in a negative light. The relationship between you and the staff, again, it's about being respectful. It's about carrying yourself as, although you're a volunteer, you're also part of that staffing complement. So the bottom line is this: you practice and standards of the leaders of the organization. It basically fosters the kind of environment that exists within an organization. It fosters whether or not the standards are executed. And I basically think that if the board is not following the standards within the organization, it becomes very hard for you to then direct executive directors or staff to do the same. There isn't two rules where it's one for the board members and one for the staff. The policy and procedures are developed specifically as guidelines to help board members stay out of situation where they would run into difficulty or be in conflict of interest or unethical situation. So a lack of ethical base equals a lack of success in the organization. And the worst thing is when the community has lost faith in you based on your practices, because it doesn't matter how good you are, if the community doesn't buy into you and support your vision, then service then gets impacted by that. So it's important that the board as a whole adopt that. So at this time, I want to kind of have a sense again of how many of you have a code of conduct policy, or it may not be a policy, but it's a statement that basically says, this is what I expect you to do while you are a board member. How many of you currently in your organization have a code of conduct? And if you don't have one, I would suggest that you get the board to quickly design one. The same as you have a code of conduct for your staff, there should be a code of conduct for the volunteer board. And it's something that would be signed around the statement of commitment. You can add it onto the statement of commitment. So it's basically the responsibility of the board and each member to the membership. So that's what the code of conduct basically is saying, that when you sign this statement that you're going to adhere to the following principles. So how many of us currently have that? So we have about 89% of the panel currently have one, and about 11% do not. I would encourage that 11% to charge the chair of your board to sit down with their executive committee and draft one. It would actually eliminate a lot of issues for you in the future to have that code of conduct. The conflict of interest policy, code of conduct, confidentiality, all of those things need to be in place before you take on your role as a new board member, and you need to sign off of it saying that, yes, you're willing to do that. So I, as a board member, basically will say, I will always hold the betterment of the organization in my priority. So basically, what does that mean? I'm going to participate in discussions. I'm going to be there for voting. When voting happens, if I disagree, I'm going to state the reason or rationale behind my decision to vote or not vote. I recognize that you have an obligation to act in the best manner, again, for the organization, and you have to be able to hold yourself up to public scrutiny. That's, I mean, we expect of a politician, it's no different than being a board member. you have to be able to be challenged on what you do, and at the end be able to say, here is how I fear, this is how I come out in the end of it, so it doesn't leave the organization in liable situation. Because when all is said and done, it's not about you individually that we worry about, it's about the liability for the organization, and understand for yourself that you can be sued based on perception, right? How far it goes determines how, the lawyer that person has. But you do not want to put the organization in a compromised situation. So it is important that directors understand those particular stuff. So my duty is to make sure that policies, procedures, standards, all of those things are in place, that I'm going to constantly work on improving them. So every time something becomes obsolete, I as a board member who's hitting the ground running will bring new vision, will bring new energy to help bring new standards. So this is how we operate. And the standards is not only how we operate, but it's also standards that helps the leadership within the organization to evaluate their staff as well. Again, that whole thing is that you will not abuse your power, and I can't emphasize that enough. It's like, as a board member, you're there and you came on board because you believe in the vision of the organization. You didn't come to usurp power. You didn't come to take over management of the organization. You came to guide the process to help them evolve, to become stronger. And if your ego is in check, then it shouldn't be a problem. If your ego is not in check, then you'll run into issues where your duties may supersede the power that you actually have been given. You know what they say about absolute power corrupts absolutely. So, and I think, again, if we have those, policies in place, you limit the possibility of that happening. I talked earlier about not demanding stuff from the employees, saying that I need a cell phone, a business card, or I don't have a benefit, so because I'm a board member, I want to buy into it. Unless it's part of your constitution, it isn't something that you should be requesting. So again, going back to, and I'm going to keep saying this over and over again, conflict of interest. Most organizations run into difficulty over this particular piece. People not declaring your conflict of interest, right? This is where we run into a lot of problems, is when you know that you are aware of stuff that's going on with that organization. You sit in another organization and you use that information to benefit the, two organizations or yourself. It's unethical. So before you get into that situation, I suggest that you do sign off and you do understand the role that you are currently holding. Any questions at this point? Okay, we'll move on. So once a decision is made in regards to conflict, the board basically has the responsibility to say to you, you can abstain, you need to abstain from a particular vote. So if I know another organization that I'm working with have given funding for a particular project, and we're making a decision about that project, and the board will say to you, you need to not be involved in this process because you're speaking of both, the funder as well as the board, and that you cannot do. So they have the right to basically say you cannot participate, that you will leave the board meeting, and that they may go in camera and ask you to leave the meeting, and that's okay. So you understand that up front, and that the decisions that is made will be recorded, and with the possibility of them also saying why they've asked you to do so. The boards that I've sat on, when there have been conflict of interest stuff, it has been written that, Yolande Charles has declared conflict of interest for personal reasons. So again, it depends on the type of board that you are in and how you guys have set up your process about documenting conflicts. Here are some sample situations where you may run into conflict. So where you have to make a decision or act and it's not motivated by the best interests of the organization. I've already explained what that means. Where you have a contract with the organization and you are seeking employment from that same organization. So you have a contract with one organization, you're a board member in another, and then you're seeking employment with the other organization that you sit those are potential. Where you learn of opportunity that for you to make money while sitting in the position of a board, conflict of interest again, where you are related to someone in the organization, or you put that person who you're related, you put their best interests ahead of the organization. All of those are potential conflict situation. So it's important that you know that. So information again, when we talk about information and the role of a board, you have access to resources. And sometimes it is very tempting to want to take, advantage of that information. So if the information is obtained while you are in the position of a board member, you have to let that information go. You cannot act on that information. Your family can't act on that information. So I know that the City of Toronto is about to put out a contract because I happen to sit on a board, and I tell my uncle and I tell my friends about go out and do that. I'm not acting in the best interest of my organization, because as I'm represented, the paper trail can come back to me, and if it does come back to me, that creates a lot of legal issues for myself, and it jeopardizes your time as an active and I don't like to use ethical, but I'll say ethical board member. Okay? Again, your responsibility is to be alert to information which the organization can use. So basically, as a board member, I'm constantly looking for ways for my organization to grow, whether it be funding opportunities, whether it is strategic planning, or just program. You just came back from being away, you saw an incredible program, and it's something that you think your community can utilize. You bring it forth and you see if it's something that within the guidelines of your funding, or if it's a community need. So you're always looking for ways to help the organization move forward. Again, information that you receive, you're not going to share it unless you give permission to, you're given permission to do so. So when I say share information, I'm not talking about during a board meeting you're sharing information about proposals or funding or something else that's happening within the community. What I'm talking about is when you're outside of that organization or outside of the board, sharing information. The community is very small, and sometimes we forget about that. It's like being in the elevator and you're talking about something that the board just passed, like some contentious issue. You don't know who the other members in the elevator may be, and as an end result, you may have put yourself in a situation that potentially can become liable, not just for you, for the organization. So the piece of confidentiality becomes equally important. When you're not at the board, the information that you are given as a board member basically should not be discussed outside of the board. I mean, it's one thing if the executive directors call you and they're needing some clarification, but it's another for you to sit with your friends and share, some of the information that you heard as a person sitting on a particular board. Lots of organization has had fundings and other things impacted because of the issue of breach of confidentiality. So it's important for staff to keep confidentiality, and equally important for board members to do the same as well. Resources as well. It's the whole idea that I will be mindful of resources which are in my trust. So for instance, the income statement or the proposals. When you leave the board, don't take a copy of the proposals and then go out and apply to Trillium or apply to Citizen Immigration and then try and usurp your power and take funding away because you're upset with that particular board. I mean, crazy things do happen, but the bottom line is any resources that you become privileged to once you leave that particular board or while you're on that board, you're going to protect those resources, that you're not going to take it again for the benefit of your good. Reimbursement, this is something that each board, it's done differently, whether it be petty cash or it's spending that is incurred. And I'll give an example. If there's a course that is offered on strategic leadership and you want to register for that, you as a board member bring it to the board and ask if you can participate in that. If it's not a free course and it has to be funded, then there has to be a process in order for that to happen. You can't just go and register for a course without prior approval and then come back and say, I want my money back. Doesn't work that way, right? So it's legitimate expenses. You went for lunch and you happened to run into another board member and the two of you had lunch. If it wasn't specifically luncheon for the matters of the board, you cannot ask for reimbursement for that lunch, right? And any of the expenses that you're going to bring forth, make sure that you're able to explain it if it comes into challenge by the chair or the president of the organization. Gifts, again, and hospitality. We talk about that a little bit, that the bottom line is you can accept information, you can accept handouts, you can accept stuff on behalf of the organization, but you should not be accepting personal gifts. You should not be accepting stuff for your personal gain. Everything that you get within the role of chair or member belongs to the organization and should be distributed accordingly. There should be a policy in place for this for board members as much as there is a policy for staff. It's the same thing if you happen to go out and, you know, it's time to upgrade your cell phone and you know that there's a good cell phone plan at work and you ask, you know, can I get my upgrades done through the organization? It's not really there for that purpose, so you might want to actually just go to Rogers and get your own updates. Again, we talk a lot about how you represent the organization in the community, how you represent the organizations to government officials or other businesses. It's also part of the conduct, it's also part of the ethics, how you do so. And again, you always want to leave that positive impression of the organization. You will preserve the reputation of the organization, and as a board member, you're charged with not damaging the image of that organization. So how you are perceived in the community is equally as important as how you carry yourself while you're in the building, overseeing matters of the board and its members. The chair of the board, you need to ensure that the policies are fair. And what I mean by that is if you don't explain something to someone at the beginning and give them the opportunity to opt out, it becomes very difficult later on to implement or to hold them accountable for it. Having said that, if you volunteer to be a board member, you sign on knowing that you have a legal responsibility for the duty you have undertaken. So I'm not going to sit here and say that it's solely the responsibility of the chair to ensure that everything is always on the up and up. And so, but I am saying it is the chair's responsibility to make sure that each board member that comes on has a orientation around the ethics and the code of conduct. So ultimately, it's the responsibility of that person, the chair, to make sure that the policies go out in the orientation package, and that if there is ever a situation where conflict comes up or a code of ethics bylaw is broken, that there's a process in place that somebody makes a written complaint, that the board will have a tribunal, 3 board members at least will sit, hear the complaint, within 30 days or within the next board meeting, a recommendation or a resolution will be brought forth. The decision will also be written, and it would be sent to the people who made the complaint. So if you ever have complaints in the community about a board member or about issues, there should be a process. This is just a sample of something you might want to engage if you don't already have. Penalties, again. If the situation is about you're having a problem with the chair of the board or the president of the board, then the vice chair or vice president is the person that will then step in and make sure that the complaint is heard and that the process, again, that was previously outlined, does follow through. So if you are in breach of the code, you can be excluded from future meeting and discussions, which relates specifically to the issue. You can be asked to be removed from the board. I have sat on a board where that decision has had to happen, where we've had to vote and ask someone because it was a continual thing. So we went into in camera and had a couple of special meetings that, you know, we had to write the delegates and basically let them know that we're holding a special meeting, and it was in regards to this particular member, letting the member know that this was happening, and then also in writing letting them know the end result. It was timely, it was exhausting, it was unnecessary, because I think the piece that we failed was in the orientation, there were gray areas that we didn't expect to have issues with, and when it came up, I guess we assumed that by just having a conversation it would go away, and it did not. So what I'm saying here is learn from our errors, which is when the contentious issues happen, it's not just about having a conversation, it's about having a documented process that allows for transparency, but also it allows the board an out if the situation doesn't clear itself up. So it is very important that all members sign off saying that they agree to participate in this. So we're in the section now around evaluation and why it's important. And I just want to know if, how many of you have a system in place to evaluate board's performance? I know we always have staff evaluation, but how often do we actually do the evaluation of a board? And when you're doing the evaluation of a board, basically it is important to find out, are they really helpful? So I've been sitting on this board for a year and we haven't moved anywhere. We haven't done anything. Am I obsolete? You know, that performance indicator tells me whether or not the board is doing what they say they're going to do. So it's important that you have a system in place to do so, to monitor performance and to ensure accountability, to oversee financial management and ensure appropriate risk management. In the form, there's a huge section done on risk management, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time repeating it here, but I would encourage you to go online to the ACASI form where there's been work done on risk management. And I think it's very important if you are an executive director or a board member that you understand the piece around the risk management. Wow, 27% only. I'm shocked. 73% do not have. Okay, people, this is your wake-up call. Time for you to get off your hands, go out and get an evaluation process in place. This is the way that you can then know if the organization is growing, if the organization is stagnant, if board members have become obsolete. Nothing like having someone sitting on a board for 15 or 20 years because they enjoy the work. It's great to enjoy the work, but at some point, if you're not helping the vision to move forward, that enjoyment should be done on a beach with a tequila. So what I may suggest is that if you haven't done so, there's a lot of wonderful resources available. And on Thursday, when I do the Q&A, I'm going to put some examples of check marks, basically, or checklists for evaluation of boards. So check back on Thursday, this Thursday, 10 to 11, and you will be able to get information about how to do the evaluation if the piece I'm about to do doesn't clearly answer your particular question. So you're training board members. Part of the evaluation as well is how well does each board member understand the financial statement of the organization? How well do they understand the model that you operate under? So when you come and you say you're running at a surplus or a deficit, how many board members actually understand that? So one of the functions of the board is to teach the members how to be good board members. So you're teaching them the areas that are usually not expert areas for everyone. I can tell you when I joined most board, I had no clue how to read a financial statement. And it was the treasurer that actually had a meeting one day and said, okay, I'm going to do the 411 for all the board members on how to read it. The most beneficial experience I've ever had, Because later when I became chair of several different boards, it was so important that I understood, you know, the checks and balances in order for us to know how solvent we were as an organization. It's great to sit on the role of a board. I mean, it looks wonderful on your resume. You feel as you're contributing to society. But if you're sitting on a board and you're actually not helping them grow, get out. You know, too long, too soon. It's just, to me, don't waste time. Don't waste your time. Don't waste their time. So the bottom line is, the indicators for evaluating is, you have things that you watch for. So it could be simple as, how well are they spending the revenue? How well are they managing work plans? How well? So there are indicators that you put out for you to say, as an organization, as a board leadership, these are our indicators to let us know we're moving forward. These are indicators to let us know we're not moving forward. If you have a board meeting where 3 months later you're still trying to come on to a decision about a topic, are you really being effective? I mean, really, most issues, one board meeting, 2 hours later, you have a resolution. If not, you go in camera or you pull a committee together and you move the issues along. 3-4 minute meetings later, you're still hashing it out, something is wrong. So part of your evaluation should let you know that, right? Your plan. So the bottom line is, there's a strategic plan at the beginning of every new board. And that strategic plan helps you to evaluate, are you meeting your short and long-term goals? So it gives you not just the historical perspective of the organization, but it also gives you a projection of where you're going to go. So I charge the 73% of people who have not yet sat through the evaluation process or have an evaluation process to encourage your board to do a strategic planning session ASAP to evaluate where you are. So the piece I said around risk management, this is the link here to give you more information on risk management. Part of your indicators is the financial solvency of the organization, the operation of the organization, the professional liability, the statutory liability, and the reputation. So the bottom line is, if you cannot respond to those things and show growth in the particular area, then you are not functioning to the best of your ability. So organization aware of the financial exposure on the asset side, as well as if you're into endowment fund, because there are some boards out there that do have endowment funds, you need to know the risk portfolio, the investment, and you have to, you just have to have a policy in place to understand how you do that investment. Because when money is being endowed to you, it's very different than when it's given to you on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. So just check into the link, the additional resource here on Ocassie's Ogwise, and you can get a lot more information. So members posed a question on how to make your board recognize that evaluation is needed, especially if the board feels that they are not accountable to anyone. So why do they exist if they're not accountable to anyone? The bottom line is, this is a piece that is around strategic planning. So this is where you do team building exercise to show the benefits to your organization to have a functioning board. And when I sat in the role of chair, this was the first thing that I would do. Within the first weekend, we would host a retreat, and I would basically sit and talk about the risk management, evaluation, conflict. It was a team building exercise that allowed me to kind of see where board members stood in their understanding around their accountability. The bottom line is this: if you as a board is not accountable for what you do, you're basically saying you're not accountable for the programs that are being offered in the community. You're not accountable for the solvency of that organization. You can willy-nilly make decisions that will adversely affect the community, and in the end what happens is the organization loses its funding. So it comes down to dollars and cents. So if someone is saying to you, we are not accountable, then when funding is cut, then you can say that's the reason why you are not accountable, is because you have no transparency, you have no accountability measures in place. So as an end result, funders will not want to continue to work with you. So I think the arrogance of anyone who would say we are not accountable as a board, then for me that basically says, you know, red flag, you're putting me in liable situation, because you're making, you're voting on stuff, you are making decisions on behalf of an organization, and you really don't care. That's what it comes down to. It's a blatant disregard for the health and welfare of that organization. And if I was in that position, I would have to look at this board and actually say, how effective are you truly as a board if you are not willing to stand by and make accountability pieces? So how do you convince a board? Unfortunately, some people cannot be convinced once they have it in their mindset that, you know, I'm the chair of the board, I'm the president of the board, and I'm just going to do whatever. That's a very dangerous thing, because funding is aligned to how well you function as an organization. And this is where you go back to the Constitution, and this is where I would charge the members of the board or the executive director to make sure that the Constitution, and I've said this in the orientation section, that people need to sign off. There has to be a way that the chair are aware that the new board members, the old board members, have read the policies and procedures, and they actually have signed off on it. And if they have not, then I think they should not be allowed to be an active board member until they do so. You know, boards should be aware of operational risk, because the bottom line is, without funding, an organization doesn't exist. So if you're mismanaging, the likelihood is that organization will not continue to be there. They should be aware of their professional liability. Because you are not a paid staff doesn't mean you're not to be acting in a professional manner, or that you're not personally responsible for the decisions that you make. That you, again, you need to just basically compliance. The work environment is difficult enough for the staff, for the volunteers. The last thing you need is a board that is creating dissension within an organization. Believe it or not, how we operate as board members have a ripple-down effect to the staff and to the community and the reputation as a whole. So when you're going to do the evaluation, these are the areas that you need to, or these are the things that you need to have in play. You need to have a strategic plan. So the strategic plan is a guideline for where you're going. Because then you can have measures within that strategic plan to look towards to say, okay, we're on task. The budget is an area that you also need to, is the organization spending too much? Are you aware of how much money the organization take in, how much money that goes out? The bylaws need to be evaluated. Are we adhering to those bylaws? Are they obsolete? Does it need to be changed, right? Events and programs in the community. You don't have to be responsible for the implementation of them, but the standards around how they are facilitated is something that you'll be helping the leader of the organization to do. The website, how many hits do you get on your website for board inquiries as well as other information? So is there a way to track that? Do you already have a tracking system on your website? Those things all help the board to know the interests of the organization, the interests for potential new board members. Financial report. Again, can you read it? Do you know what it says? Do you know how, when the treasurer is signing off on information, do you actually know what exactly are they signing off on? So all of those things are very important. So for me, it becomes equally important for the board to have an understanding of that. Internal controls, petty cash, who signs it, where are the minutes for the meetings, who calls the meeting, where are the agenda, when does the agenda go out, all of those things. When you're speaking out in the community, what are the feedbacks you're getting? Are you hearing that board members are pain in the behind, or are you hearing those people represent the organization well, that they're in tune to what's happening? The other wonderful evaluation tool is when someone leaves the board, that you do an exit interview, because that really gives you bird's eye view on how effective were you as a board. If someone is leaving before their term, there has to be a reason for it, other than sickness or health-related issues. If someone is just leaving and they're not willing to communicate, that person is a wonderful resource to you to let you know as a board how effective you truly are. The same as if a staff is leaving, you want to do that exit interview. So all of this evaluation can be done via the interviews, focus group. So you can have the committee, the recruitment committee, could basically have a meeting with all of the board members who are about to leave or the community and do evaluation. One of the things that I suggested when I was a board in one of the communities, well, we have a evaluation box, and bottom line is consumers of the organization on a regular basis were asked to just kind of, give feedback of topics like, when you see us in the news, how do we represent the voice of the community? When you come into the organization, how ethical are our practice and standards? So stuff like that. Do surveys of ex-board members. Do surveys of current board members. It doesn't just have to be done at the end of service. It can be done, and I would encourage it to be done, say, quarterly. And it's something that the executive committee can take on. Audit processes. It's just not just the financial audit, but you can also audit how you are operating as a whole. Benchmark. So in your strategic, tie it back to the strategic plan. In your strategic plan, you say, by the 4th month of the new board, we will have X amount of dollars secured for the organization, or we will secure X amount of new funders. So you have to have processes in place in order for that to happen. And then direct feedback. The bottom line is, as the chair, you should be checking in with your board on an ongoing basis to see where they are. And you should be given feedback, because if you have worked your ranks through the ranks to where you've been elected as chair, it means you have the integrity of the organization, you have the knowledge, you have the fortitude to be a person who could take and give feedback. So as the chair of the board, one of your role is to pull board members aside who are not holding their weight and basically say to them, you're not. I mean, why are you in that role if it's not to help the organization move forward and to actually help new members to become more knowledgeable? When you leave a board, the bottom line is this. If you came in with limited knowledge about the organization, when you leave after your 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, or 5-year term, you should have done at least 3 things to help that organization move their vision forward. If in 25 years you've helped yourself move forward, then you owe that organization 25 years of, I don't know, donuts, coffees. But the bottom line is this. As a board member, you have the sole responsibility for the function of the organization. The policies and procedures that are put in place via the bylaws and the Constitution are there to help you to stay out of difficulties. The same as you have the responsibility for staff to actually be able to follow guidelines, you should also have the same for the board. It becomes the responsibility of the chair in conjunction with the executive director to get feedback about what you're hearing about, how things are moving for that organization, how things are moving in the community, the perception that people have of you being an active board. I think it's wonderful when you as a staff are in community meetings and you can come back to the board and say, I heard wonderful comments about something the chair did or something that the fundraising committee did. We're hearing feedback from the community about the work that is being done by the board. The board, although they're in the background, doesn't mean that they're invisible, but that they use the power in a way that it does not usurp the power of the leadership within the organization. You charge the executive director or the senior staff to do work, the board is there to support that individual to do so. So again, it's important that before you sign on, that you understand confidentiality, ethics, conflict of interest, as well as your role in it. And if you're not able to follow through and you're not able to sign off, then you should just basically pass on your term within the board. So I'd like to take this time to thank everyone who's participated in the 6th series on the governance and strategic leadership. As Petra said at the beginning, the resources for the previous ones are on the forum. On the 15th, I will be answering questions on this particular sessions or any other questions you may have about governance and strategic leadership. I'm open for help in the process. So if you're a new board member, existing board member, and you need that help, that's resources there. Again, visit the web, the forum to get more information, or check in with OCASI around the resources that they are developing and ongoing to help your organization to achieve best practice and become one of the leaders in the community in your respective areas. So I thank you for that.
Thanks everyone for joining us on the webinar today. We greatly appreciate it, and those of you who have joined us for the 6th series, we greatly appreciate it and hope that you've learned a lot of and got a lot of information. Hope we'll see you online on Thursday when Yolanda will be on the Community of Practice, which is the WISE forum, answering specific questions. If you have questions that you would like to send to me, you can. If you have confidential questions, you can also send them to me.